Okay, so translation by Srila Prabhupada. The great sages, having thus decided, approached King Vena. Concealing their real anger, they pacified him with sweet words, and then spoke. Munaya uchuhu nrupa varya nibodhaitad yatte vigyapayamabho ayushri balakirtinam tavatata vivardhanam. The great sages said, Dear King, we have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life and your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Vedic civilization, in a monarchy, the king is advised by saintly persons and sages. By taking their advice, he can become the greatest executive power, and everyone in his kingdom will be happy, peaceful, and prosperous. The great kings were very responsible in taking the instructions given by great saintly personalities. The kings used to accept the instructions given by great sages like Parashara, Vyasadeva, Narad, Devala, and Asita. In other words, they would first accept the authority of saintly persons and then execute their monarchical power. Unfortunately, in the present age of Kali, the head of government does not follow the instructions given by the saintly persons. Therefore, neither the citizens nor the men of government are very happy. Their duration of life is shortened, and almost everyone is wretched and bereft of bodily strength and spiritual power. If citizens want to be happy and prosperous in this democratic age, they should not elect rascals and fools who have no respect for saintly persons. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Okay, we'll do the Mangal Charan together. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudei Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Sarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Titanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So we have a very nice verse today. I was pretty happy when I saw it to have an opportunity to speak about the importance of hearing from saintly persons. Actually, today we've all gathered to hear from the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is my humble self. Though I'm, not a saintly person, uh, one sitting on this seat is doing their best to represent Srila Vyasadeva, who is the compiler of all of the Vedas, but most importantly the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it is said that everyone who hears the narrations, the glorifications, the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam is glorified and is purified. The speaker, the listener, and even just a incidental bystander. So yeah, today we are all here to hear from the saintly persons who have brought Srimad Bhagavatam to not just this planet, but to the Western countries in the age of Kali Yuga. We heard from the rishis just in that second verse that they gave two instructions to King Vena. They first said that, what was it? Sorry. You should receive good advice from themselves, saintly persons, and secondly, you should do so with great attention. So, looking at that, sort of two topics came to mind. First of all, from who should we be hearing, and secondly, how should we be hearing? We have a kind of triple layered safety net as devotees. We often talk about the three places we should go when we have questions about the Shastra or just anything concerning spiritual life as a devotee. The first is the Guru, the second is the Sadhu, and the third is Shastra. So right now we're going to Shastra, but it's quite interesting how within the Shastra, all the way through, we're hearing from saintly persons, from sadhus. So within Shastra is the sadhu, and actually the sadhu is the one who brings us to the Shastra, teaches us how to read the Shastra as well. And then even further, it is only by the authority of the Shastra that we understand that we actually have to take shelter of a bona fide guru, and then even further how to discern who is a bona fide guru. All of that is given in the Shastra. So these three safety nets, these three places that we go when we have doubts or confusion in spiritual life, they're all actually very intimately intertwined. It becomes a bit difficult to separate them actually when you analyze it in that way. I guess the importance of having the sadhu and the guru is that you're having a living. The Shastra is a living teaching. Sanatana Goswami says that Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalidvanto Ditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartata. He says that the Srimad Bhagavatam is actually the life air of all of the devotees, and that it in the age of Kali it has arisen to give light to all of us, and it is the exact image of Shri Krishna. So we always say, right, that Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna. It is the literary incarnation of Krishna. So it's no ordinary book. It is actually itself, it's a living personality. When we read, we are having a conversation with Krishna. We're hearing from Krishna. I was hearing from His Grace Toshan Krishna Prabhu that actually this word Bhagavatam, I had just assumed that it was referring to Krishna, right? Because Krishna is Bhagavan. But there's a difference between Bhagavan and Bhagavat. And Bhagavatam, he says, is referring, just like in that verse from Sanatana Goswami, Sarva Bhagavata Prana, all of the devotees. It is the life air of all of the Bhagavats, the devotees. So Srimad Bhagavatam actually, it's filled with Krishna. It is non-different from Krishna, and every page talks about Krishna. But just as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, it's constantly talking about the devotees of Krishna and how they relate with Krishna, how they worship Krishna, and how they understand Krishna, how they pray to Krishna, because that's actually the most instructive for us. So it's so important that we have the association of sadhus, whether it's in the shastra or in person or through the guru. So first of all, this is the importance of hearing from the right place, the saintly persons. And the second point that we'll be discussing today is how do we hear with great attention, as mentioned by the rishis. We see in this pastime as it unfolds, King Vena, he's not being such a righteous, dharmic king, you could say. He was installed by these rishis themselves to put a stop to the influx of rogues and thieves who are causing havoc in the kingdom. And so it's effective when he's on the throne. He's such a strong force, strong ruler, that the rogues and thieves, it says they disappear like rats and snakes. But at the same time, then now he continues to be so heavy-handed that he's doing so much harm to all the citizens. So the rishis are in this dilemma, right? And they agree to go. We heard about this anger that they're concealing. And they agree to go and give counsel to King Vena. So the first thing they do before, as the pastime continues, before taking him off the throne, is that they go to give him good counsel. So we hear about this emotion of anger and how to use it in devotional service. The rishis actually give us a really perfect example in the next few verses. They go to give counsel to King Vena, and they instruct him to listen attentively. And he demonstrates basically to us what not to do, how not to listen. They give so many beautiful instructions about like the proper order of society. They even glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But King Vena, he isn't listening attentively, nor is he listening submissively. And so all of these instructions, they just go over his head, and his response is quite contrary to what they were suggesting. He even starts blaspheming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's only at that point that the rishis, they utilize this anger, which they have been very skillfully, controlling, in order to give good advice, sincere advice. It is at this point where he is now blaspheming the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that they can use this anger. And the same words, the same people who are speaking to give good advice, now it's said that just by speaking such high words, King Vena loses his life. So this is it's a very potent example of the power of speaking, but also the power of hearing. The rishis in the first hand, they are giving this advice, and King Vena ignores it. And what happens when we ignore good counsel again and again and again? We fall down. We face some challenging circumstance, or in the case of King Vena, we lose our life. All just by the power of words. And interestingly, actually, after that, it's his mother Sunita who uses the power of words. It's said that she uses mantra yogena, the power of mantra, to preserve King Vena's body. So King Vena, it's by words that both he dies and that he is preserved. And if he were to listen attentively and submissively to the instructions given by the rishis, it would have been his salvation as well. So we talk about the 9 processes of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and so on. But it's understood that Shravanam is actually the first in that list for a reason. Shravanam, everything begins actually with Shravanam. we were talking about how those three safety nets, right, of the sadhu, the guru, and shastra. Um, it's actually only by the mercy of the sadhu that we receive the shastra. And so it's only by hearing that all of these processes of devotional service can take place. Um, like for me, it sort of played out in that way, where I think I was maybe 15 or so years old, and I was just walking along the streets in Chatswood. I had actually just finished like my first date with a girl at the time, and I was late for my bus. So I was running for this bus and thinking about the where I had just been, and I was caught in these two like situations of like what I had just been doing and where I'm now running urgently. And I was running through this really busy street as well. I can remember like just how it looked, running through all these people trying to like find my way through to get to this bus. And standing in the middle of the street is a brahmachari. I didn't know at the time, but a guy with a shaved head, a big backpack on, and I think he might have even been wearing saffron at the time. But basically he looked at me, and I sort of slowed down, and we just met in the middle of this busy street, and he pulled out this orange book, a big orange hardcover book, and I don't know what he said actually, but he got me to look through it. We were looking at the pictures, and I was like, I wanted this book, it looks really beautiful. I don't really read at all, but I want this book. And he told me, you have to make a small donation. And I was like, oh no, I don't have any money. And he said, oh, it's okay, you can take one of these small ones instead. But I didn't want the small book, so I went and got $20 out, and I took the Bhagavad Gita. And that was the sadhu beginning my journey in devotional service. Not by my qualification, not by anything. I described the situation I was in, but he pulled me out, or he stopped me, and he said, try listening to this, listening to the translations and purports of Srila Prabhupada. And I didn't do it for 7 years. I had the Bhagavad Gita sitting on my shelf for 7 years. But eventually, during lockdown, I started reading. And the interesting thing is that when you start reading, the Shastra then takes you to the sadhu, back to the sadhu. So, it was lockdown when I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I went through a few times. Just had nothing else to do, fortunately. And after lockdown ended, it was like, okay, I got to go meet these people, right? I want to see what this philosophy looks like in practice. So, you come into the temple, you meet the devotees, and then you start associating, and you start engaging in these processes of devotional service. And then by that association, you come to learn about the representative of Krishna, the Guru, and the necessity of taking shelter, and like that, the sadhus, the shastra, they take you to the Guru. And it's said that in that way, Krishna gives us the Guru, and then the Guru gives us Krishna. So it's this beautiful like dance almost between all of these different embodiments of mercy, which are collaborating to take us out of the material world back to Krishna. So it's interesting, this process of hearing, it's clearly the most important, but I was hearing from His Grace Ganesham Govinda Prabhu that actually this Shravanam is the hardest. It's the most important, and of course therefore it's also the hardest of all of them. He explained why, because with hearing there is this ego which gets in the way. Like other services we can kind of do, and we're sort of displaying our service. But with hearing, it's sort of just you and the speaker, right? Like no one's gonna read out your Shravanam score in the morning, or no one's gonna say like, "Wow, well done, you were listening so beautifully today." No one notices, It's just you and the kirtan, the speaker. So in that sense, first of all, there's no like, reward. There's no external reward for hearing, and secondly, it's that ego in the sense of when you're hearing, it's sort of like a passive act. It's a receiving rather than every other service we come and we clean the temple and it's like me and my service and I'm doing it, Or if I'm leading kirtan, if I'm speaking or if I'm, leading the kirtan, then it's me, I'm doing it. And but with hearing, it's actually someone else who's leading the process, and we have to receive, and so that requires submissiveness, and that also requires this moving aside of the ego, where they should be saying like this. If I was speaking, I wouldn't say like that, or that kind of mentality. We find fault in the leader, and that's the difficulty of hearing. So how to get around that ego, how to hear properly. I was just the other day, a few of my friends, we were sitting and reading Bhagavad Gita together. And before we opened, we decided to like kind of all share what Bhagavad Gita means to each of us, or maybe like how would you describe the Bhagavad Gita to somebody who's never heard of it or never read it before. Because we were speaking about book distribution and how when you go out and you try and present Bhagavad Gita to people, they have so many like different reasons why they can't take it, we hear things like, oh, I've already got it at home, or of course I know Bhagavad Gita, I'm from India, I know Bhagavad Gita, I've heard Bhagavad Gita before, or I don't have enough money at the moment, which basically means, right, like you haven't convinced me that of the value of this book yet, because if you're living in the city, we have enough money. It's interesting, yeah, there's so many reasons why even ourselves as devotees, we don't pick up these books every day. Prabhupada, there's that beautiful audio where Prabhupada is expressing that, like, you're not reading my books, basically. You're not, Srila Prabhupada every night, he would be up after spending the whole day managing this like international organization, keeping his devotees, like on track, taking up the responsibilities of a Jagat Guru, and then he would stay up all night translating these books. He literally gave his like blood, sweat, and tears and everything, his life, air to the translation and the purports of these books. So, as devotees, who are trying to please Srila Prabhupada, it's our duty to take up these books. But why don't we? This is the question. So we were sort of discussing that, trying to understand what is the Bhagavad Gita to each of us. And it was nice. We got sort of like three very different angles. I don't know, maybe you can briefly think about what the Bhagavad Gita, how would you describe the Bhagavad Gita? If I asked you right now, like, what is Bhagavad, what's it about? Why is it there? Why do I need to read it? First, one of them said, the Bhagavad Gita is like a manual for, it's like we've appeared in this world, we took birth, we sort of got told like how to behave, but we didn't get told necessarily like how to manage this vehicle, the machine that we're embodied in, and how to live this life appropriately, properly. So that was the first kind of perspective, and then the other one was that this Bhagavad Gita is a instruction from Krishna himself to take us out of the material world back to him, which it reminded me of something I've heard from His Holiness Swami Bhagavan Keshava Swami Maharaj. He describes Bhagavad Gita as a love letter from Krishna. he sends this love letter out to all of his, you know, jivas, and he basically says like, if you do this, 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 if you meet me here at this time, you'll come back to me. He gives us these instructions, and in that way, it's like a love letter from Krishna. Meet me here, and I'll be there. It's kind of sweet. Yeah, so there was that perspective as well, and then I was sort of sharing how like the Bhagavad Gita for me, it's sort of like a book of all these different yogas. It explains all the different ways that we can progress in spiritual life, and it brings them all together in that way. Anyway, we went through like that, and then we finally decided to open the book, and it was just so bewildering. We started the introduction, you know, and it's like literally in the first 2 paragraphs, Prabhupada just hit on everything we had said so far. Yeah, it was like, first of all, like, why don't people want to take this book? And he was explaining that, saying how like people who aren't reading with that submissive, attentive mood, they feel like, already I know this, right? He gives the example of the medicine. If you take medicine from a doctor, and you take it according to your own whim, you know, you don't follow the instructions on the label, then you'll probably get more sick. So yeah, like that, you know, we take and we pick and choose what parts of the Bhagavad Gita that we want to accept. And he explains further the importance of how we hearing with, first of all, submissiveness, and second of all, he said at least the theoretical acceptance that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's that verse from Arjuna himself, you know, towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhum. You know, Krishna is Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahman, you know, the absolute Dham, the supreme abode, the rest, Pavitram, pure, Pavitram Purusham? Pavitram Purusham, he is the supreme enjoyer. Pavitram Purusham Bhavan, he's a person. Shashvatam, he's eternal. Ashashvatam Divyam, he's transcendental. Adidevam, he is the original Godhead. Ajam, he is unborn. And I always like this, at the end he just says Vibhum, he is the greatest. It's like, when you've given so many like detailed, philosophical, deep descriptions of the supremacy of God, and at the end it's just like, you know, he's just the best. And then he goes on, and this is his qualification as a hero, which Prabhupada is explaining. He goes on that all of the rishis, just like we heard in the purport, Asita, Devala, Vyasa, Narada, all of these great rishis who are authorities in spiritual life, they themselves have said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And now, Swayam Shaiva Bravishime, now you're saying it yourself to me. So, what can I do? How can I, with my limited intelligence, how can I go against all of these authorities, you know, and twist what you're saying? Oh, not Krishna is the greatest, but some little personality, some impersonal thing behind Krishna, that's the greatest. No, he's saying on the authority of all of these great rishis, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so these are the 2 most important aspects of how we hear. This submissiveness and this acceptance of Krishna as the Supreme. And it's so interesting that Prabhupada says, at least theoretically, we should have this acceptance. You know, even theoretically, or like, if we're not feeling submissive, if we're not feeling humble, at least we should just try. You know, just put on a humble mask, you know, just try. Because it's sort of like, even as devotees now, like, you know, I've been coming to the temple for 3 or so years. and every day, you're trying to deepen your relationship with Krishna, but how much do we actually know Krishna, and how much do we actually know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? How much do we know He is even real? Like, these are things which we have to grapple with as devotees every day, because we are still growing this kripa, of faith, and it's very fragile. And so it's not just for the beginner reader of the Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada says this. We need to every day just try again to accept that this big lofty truth, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you know, and to hear submissively. It's so easy to develop some pride. I've read this book before, I know what's in this book, and you just, as soon as you think like that, you just flick through every word and nothing goes in. We need to hear submissively, and so King Vena gives that example as well, of how not to hear, and what happens when we don't hear submissively. So, like that, we go through, and yeah. Ultimately, yeah, it's just this dilemma with hearing, where we're not receiving the usual kind of glorification that we get from our other services, and putting the ego aside, and sort of surrendering to Krishna on the theoretical grounds of Him as being the supreme, on the authority of more elevated persons, that we can then take that mood of submissiveness and surrender and hear effectively. Okay, so I'll just end the class there. See if anyone has any questions, comments or corrections, anything they want to add. Yes, bro. So it's not that there are no, what's the question? That there's no, it's not that there's no saintly persons. Yeah, I mean, I think that's given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that in this age of Kali, uh, those in power become, uh, less qualified, more corrupt and demonic, um, but also those who are being ruled by those in power have less trust and less respect for those in power, and it's that, and which is justified by the first point, but it's that dual kind of combination which is just deteriorating everything in the age of Kali. But that's that's given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is the eternal arrangement, this process of the yugas. It just goes on like that. So, like, yes, that's sort of the inevitable truth. And yet, Srila Prabhupada had his mission of the Varnashram Dharma to try and make some attempt to restore Dharma, Dharmic principles, and Krishna consciousness in society. And I think that's sort of like our duty as devotees as well, to try and, yeah, because I think when I hear about that sort of inevitable deterioration of, like, what's the point of even, trying to fight with Kali if it's already been said that, like, this world is just going to keep on deteriorating, right? But just in the effort, the endeavor to bring Krishna consciousness to the world, our hearts get purified, and we hear about this golden age that we've been given as well by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's sort of like he's the covered incarnation, the hidden incarnation, and so like within Kali Yuga there is this jewel, this rare opportunity to engage in Sankirtan. It's like, because the world is so fallen, there is so much seva, there is so much opportunity to preach Krishna consciousness. You just have to step outside, and anywhere you go, is an opportunity to speak about Krishna. And within the temple, if it's easier or safer inside, you can speak about Krishna in here. But that's Mahaprabhu's, Sankirtan mission, is to go outside the temple and distribute these books, the Brihad Madanga, and speak about Krishna, and give Prabhupada and his purports to all of these souls, and even to government as well. Like, there's so many different ways that we can preach, and there's so many different ways that we can bring Krishna to the world. Book distribution is the heart of our movement, and Prabhupada has emphasized again and again how dear it is to him when we distribute his books. But if we can, find ways to take these books to, universities, or to high exalted personalities, in power, in leadership, like when the ISKCON movement started, they got the Beatles engaged, in Krishna consciousness, and we say yat yat acharati shreshta, as the great personalities do, the general masses follow. So if we can, be bold and actually take some serious risk for Krishna, if we can, step out of our comfort zone and do something out of the ordinary in our preaching, and engage, those people in power. Or it's not just about people who are in leadership, it's anyone with any slightly larger amount of any of the opulences. Like, if they have just a little bit of beauty or fame or wealth, instantly there's something important in society. So, it's like anyone and everyone, we should not be discriminating with our mercy, or with the mercy of the Lord. But if we can, hit those higher targets, then maybe there will be some big change in the age of Kali. Who knows? Hare Krishna. Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees.